before he leads off on 417.
Good evening, everyone. I'm glad that you're all here tonight. We're going to take a look at something that you probably don't know anything about, and that's understandable. And you don't know how it's affecting our daily lives, the way our society is set up, and how culture is functioning right now here in the United States. And it comes from the fact that this is post or past modern times. Now that means that there, first of all, we would have to define modern times, wouldn't we? That would make sense. You can't have a past modern times without having to be able to understand modern times. And the modern times we're talking about was when people actually understood about God. Let's take a look and read this particular scripture in Jeremiah. Now don't forget, Jeremiah had a very tough road to hoe. He had a very tough job in the fact that God told him, said, here's what I want you to do. I mean, in effect. Jeremiah, I want you to go out there and I want you to preach to these people of Israel. I want you to preach for them for 50 years. And let me warn you, nobody's going to listen. That'd be a tough job, wouldn't it? So now, going into an understanding that, let's read this particular verse. Listen to what he says here in Jeremiah chapter 17 and verse 5. This is what the Lord says. Cursed is the one who trusts in man, but who depends upon the flesh of his strength, and whose heart turns away from the Lord. Wow, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? What's he saying? Now remember, he's talking to Israel who isn't paying attention to him. Let's take a look at why we call this postmodern time. Now, in pre-modern times, it was where that God was put there. Everything was according to God. God was involved in everything. Everybody understood and knew that there was a God. However, by modern times, people started to think, we're making progress. And because we're making progress, we must be pretty smart. In fact, what we're doing is we're looking around the world and we're seeing we're building these spires, these humongous buildings with beautiful gargoyles and whatever on top of them. And we must be just certainly more progressive, more intelligent than when we look around the world and we see, oh, look at those people down there in Africa. Look at them, they're living in little huts made out of dirt and they're hunting animals with sticks. We must be smarter than them. You see where evolution comes in. We must be smarter than them. And then we get to the point where we call postmodern, which means it's after those concepts in which man doesn't believe anything that's a set law. There is no truth. There is no God. There's nothing but you. So here we are. We're in this particular time period. In fact, what happened is, you all look back through history, you remember the French Revolution called the Reign of Terror, where thousands upon thousands of people were killed by guillotine in the 1700s. And you remember there was a woman by the name of Mary Shelley. And she was walking across the square one night. Her husband had been very abusive to her. Her husband had died. And she was walking across the square and she slipped and fell because it was slippery. And she looks at her hands. Her hands is about an inch of blood in the square. That's how many people have been killed by guillotine that day. And she sits down and she starts writing about this incredible evil that cannot be stopped. It was created by man, called, you remember the name of the book was Frankenstein? And this thinking went to Germany, in which they said, it must be a vampire. A vampire takes your blood so he can live, where Christ shed his blood so you can live. And if we want to talk about Frankenstein, God conquered the evil. And the evil had no power over people who are good. So it's interesting, isn't it? And then it comes to America, and we have such movies as Alien and stuff like this, where we see an evil we can't stop. Don't fly through this area because something's there, it'll come into your spaceship. You remember these stories? Or it'll be an infection that takes over the world. And so we're going to look at how we think today, and how things happen. And so here we are looking at this. Cursed is the man who turns to his own understanding. So most postmodern times believe that there is no God but man. Now, that's logical, isn't it? Can't you understand then why people would say, well, I'm just born in the wrong body? How does God, there is no God. God wouldn't have done that to me. So guess what I can do? I can change it myself. I can take and I can change my existence. I can change how I look, who I am, how I identify, what I think is what's important. And don't you tell me about any truth. There is no truth. What I believe to be true is true. So we have people who say there is no God, there is no heaven, there is no hell, there are no angels. When you die, you go in the ground and the worms eat you. Guess who said that? Madalyn Murray O'Hair. Do you remember Madalyn Murray O'Hair? You've got to be mature to know Madalyn Murray O'Hair, because in the 50s, she's the one who got prayer struck out of the schools. We used to pray. In the mornings, we would have our Pledge of Allegiance and have the prayer and all that stuff to pray. And it got to where now you can't even pray before a football game or something like that, you know. And it even got to the point where you can't have the Bible on your desk. I was listening to some teachers the other day who said they can't even discuss, like if a child comes up to them and is all distraught and hurt and everything, they can't even give them comfort that God loves them or anything like that. So you see, we've come to a different society, and you've got to be able to understand that. We've progressed beyond that thinking that there is a God into realizing we're God. And we can decide what we want. And when we die, we just die. And you remember Ecclesiastes says that. When you die, you don't think anymore. It's just gone. But who was he? He was living according to man's wisdom, not according to God's wisdom, who says we are forever. So we better act correctly. We better live correctly. There's no God. I'm not going to pretend that there is, just so you can continue to live in a fantasy world that is caustic to the real one. Why in the world should I live like that? You're going to tell me that sex is only for marriage? I mean, come on. You're going to tell me I can't lie, I can't cheat, I can't do whatever I want. I'm going to do whatever I can so long as I don't get caught. You remember the old motto that thieves have? You don't know the thought motto, huh? Well, it is, what's mine is mine, and what's yours is mine if I can get it. Simple, isn't it? So, here's what God says. Cursed is the one who trusts in man. He's going to decide what is right for himself, and it will not bode well. he is going to be lost. He is going to be a man who trusts an object that will not last very long on this physical realm. How long does a man live? How much can a man learn? Can a man in his lifetime be able to search all the books, be able to search all the world to be able to find the answers? And hey, let me ask you this, what if the answers are on the moon? From what I understand, we have never been there anyway. So, how do we know? Well, here's the reality. Be careful. Don't trust a man. So we hear all these preachers who are preaching, and they're telling you things like, oh, all you have to do is believe. All you have to do is confess. All you have to do is let God. Christ has already done a complete work. You don't have to do anything else. Just trust a man to tell you what's right. You don't have to worry about anything else. So here's what we do. Whoever turns their heart away from God will be cursed. Beware, he's saying, be careful. And there are people out there who are false teachers, and they don't care that they're taking you with them. Do you ever see the movies Equalizer with Denzel Washington? And in the movie Equalizer, he's up there, he's going to the local diner at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. He's reading a book. He goes back home. He tries to get to sleep, and he's up before his alarm goes off. He's already dressed and shaving and everything before his alarm even goes off. And then one day he goes out to this bad guy came into the store, like a Home Depot or something, and steals makes the cashier give him all the money, and even makes her give him her wedding ring. And so he goes over to the wall and he gets a small sledgehammer, and the next day he comes back, he's got the ring, and that night he sleeps well. Because you know what they know in Proverbs it says evil men can't even sleep unless they first do something evil. And they're trying to use that to show how this man, by doing not what's evil, but what's right, which was to get the ring back and to get the money back, but he can't sleep because of that. And so this is a false teaching of a truth, just like this picture here of a wolf in sheep's clothing, trying to make sure that they teach the sheep what is going on correctly. These people are out there teaching our children and us through movies and books and constant barrage of commercials and so on. Hey, if you're going to have a good life, you're going to have to drink this beer instead of that beer over there. That beer over there just won't give you as good a life as this beer will, and those kind of things. So now that takes us to the second point, that God is just not worthwhile. Let's take a look at Romans chapter 1, verse 28. Romans chapter 1, verse 28. Look what it says there. Furthermore, since they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, he gave them over to a depraved mind to do what ought not be done. Did you see that? He says, you know what? Those who reject the knowledge of God, beware. Beware. There's 2 words in antiquity. Behold, look over there. Or beware. This is going to damage you. This is going to hurt you. Behold, there's a truth, there's a good. Oh, beware, there's an evil. And here he's saying, look out. Don't reject the knowledge of God. Because if you reject it, you can't live by it, and that means you will not live forever. You will be constantly in the process of dying, because you're going to be without God. Your days will be completely without anything good. I can't imagine, so you go to a meal, and you sit down at the meal, and you look around, and man, this food looks horrible, that's all there's to it. And I don't like fish, there's nothing but fried fish, and you look around and you say, ooh, man, there's something that looks good. You look over there, there's a little pizza, homemade pizza, wow, the way they put on there. It looks like, oh man, that's bacon bits. That's gonna be some good pizza. Can you imagine there's never anything good? I can't think that. But that's the way it is in hell. There's not going to be anything good there. Just the opposite. In heaven, you're going to get there, and everything's going to be bacon pizza. Everything's going to be good. None of it's going to be bad. And I can't imagine that either, because we always have bad. As good as things are going, you go into your bedroom, and you get your little jammies on for bed, and you turn around and go, and stub your toe. There's no toe stubbing in heaven. I don't know how that works. But there is. I'd like it if there wasn't any showers in heaven. I don't like things that. I like being clean. I don't like the process. Anyway, so we have to realize, if you reject what God says is true, in other words, how to live your life, how you should think, how you should act, how you should respond to the urges and needs of your body, how you should control yourself. If you're not into that, if you reject that, well, guess what? You're ultimately rejecting God. If you reject His Word and what He has done, then you're ultimately rejecting Him. Remember, it doesn't matter if you're male or female. I mean, you're stuck in that position. But ultimately, you're not going to be that in heaven or in hell. You don't have to worry about that. The reality is, you're a spiritual being that's going to live forever. Figure it out. Make sure you do what's right. So when you reject God, when you reject His Word and everything about yourself, then you're absolutely rejecting God. So here's what you do. God gives you over to a depraved mind. Meaning, your mind is out of order. It doesn't think right. It doesn't act right. It doesn't function right. It is a depraved mind. And there are things that are being done today we can't even fathom. When we think about it, we say, how in the world did they ever come up with something like that? I would never dream that in a million years. I mean, a depraved mind thinks of how to pervert what is proper, just, and right to do. So take, for instance, like church. If we were here in church and all of a sudden we come in and there is a drag queen for the preacher, well, how would that be? That'd be kind of interesting, wouldn't it? Kind of different, wouldn't it? Or maybe you're going to take your kids to the library and you're going to have a story time, and you've got a drag queen or a furry there. You know, furries, that's some bad stuff that you may not know about it. Now I can explain it here. But furries, you know, stay hidden behind a mask while they do whatever they want with their bodies. That's about the cleanest way to explain it. And so you say to yourself, in the world would somebody think of something like that? These poor innocent kids. Yeah, well, what about the dating apps we have today? Which is just a hookup culture, it's all there is to it. They say, men don't want to marry anymore. I'm not surprised. They don't have to. They don't have to commit themselves to anyone. They don't have to care about anyone. All they can do, they can sit there and care about themselves all they want to. They can drink their beer, watch their movies, go out and get a date, not for the purpose of eating a meal, but the purpose of having sex with someone. After they get through, then they can go home, enjoy themselves, and they don't have to have a woman around. They can pay one to clean up their house. And in some cases, that may be far cheaper, because they'd have to pay for someone who is doing it, leaving them. Well, what about all the false religions out there? Can you imagine? How in the world can you make so many false religions? How can you have so many? Because man who trusts in himself can come up with anything. You remember David Koresh down in Texas? You remember Jim Jones over in Guyana? You remember those people who were waiting on when the Halley's Comet was going to come by, and they were going to kill themselves and attach themselves to the comet and live forever? And you say, oh, that's kind of extreme, isn't it? Do you think going out there to a place in Japan and beating a gong so it wakes up the gods so they can hear your request isn't done? Isn't out there? What about Islam? Did you know they said that in Iran they have 100,000 mosques in Iran, and 50,000 of them have closed because over the years of Islam, all they've made out of Islamic people were atheists? Isn't that interesting? I bet that didn't go the way they thought it would. What about the fact that we have over 38,000 denominations that call themselves Christian? Out of one Christ, with one word, we've got 38,000 different facets of the same religion that says theirs is the right way to God. So you see, false religion, you can see how it's distorted and destroyed and depraved the mind can get. I'm going to believe that. Here comes a guy dressed in a robe, wearing a weird hat, carrying a walking stick, and he comes up and he says, "Oh, bless you," and hands you a piece of bread, and you say, "Oh," and he says, "Stick your tongue in." What? Wait a minute. I don't want you putting something in my mouth. Let me check it out first. No. Or what about being a Nazi? I mean, anything like that goes crazy. You have to think about where we are in the kind of thinking. Their thinking became worthless. As verse 21 says, futile. Meaning their thinking became based on ignorance. Ignorance of what? Of the knowledge of God and how God has designed us to live and to prosper. Here's what he says in Deuteronomy. If you follow my laws, my edicts and commands, you will have life and prosperity. If you do not, you will have death and destruction. Why in the world would we not listen to that? Why would we listen to ourselves or to another man and follow him? You ever heard Dan Dwyer? You remember probably the time period in which there was a lot of people like Tony Robbins and people like that who are all out there talking about how you should live your life and how you should think and really get successful and everything. Well, then Dwyer, he said to people, Wayne Dwyer, that's Wayne Dwyer, you know, quite right, but I was close. And it's hard to get Dwyer in there, so Dryer. But anyway, he said, you know, the universe just longs to be with you. And so if you ask for it, you just send it and say, okay, I'm going to Walmart. Now, universe, I'm going to Walmart. I'm thinking, universe already knows, you know, but anyway. And so I want you to get me a parking place there up close. And so sure enough, when you pull in, there's somebody back in right there. Universe is giving you what you want. So all you have to do is ask for what you want, and the universe will supply it. And you know, people buy into it. They buy into it far more. And the fact that God tells you there's going to be a day in which there's a judgment coming, and you have to follow Him, or you will be lost forever. Isn't that amazing? Don't you find that fascinating? And yet that's the time in which we live now. Let's go over to Psalms chapter 52. Psalm 52, verses 6 through 7. Look at what it says here. The righteous will see and fear, and will laugh and say, at him saying, here now is the man who did not make God his stronghold. It is not correct. 52. Oh, yes it is. Okay. Here is now the man who did not make God his stronghold, but trusted in his great wealth, and grew strong by destroying others. You remember what Jesus said about that to the rich young ruler? Go and give away your wealth. What was wrong? He was trusting in his wealth. He was trusting in his great wealth, wherever that wealth was. And let me tell you something, there are people out there who are trusting in their educational wealth. They think they are the most important people in the world, and everybody else is their slave. The World Economic Forum says you are nothing but something to be gotten rid of, because they consider you to be useless eaters who are wasting their resources. Can you imagine? Would you ever think of that way about another person? But they do. Look at this uniform he's wearing here. What does that make you think of? Star Wars or something? You know, or maybe, what was that Superman movie where they had a bunch of people stand around or listen to him making decisions for him and everything? He thinks he's king of the world. This is a global politics. What about the universities? How about this guy here who said he's a scientist and he has studied science so much, he has studied and studied and studied, and just before he died, even though he was bound to a wheelchair using all the possible advances we have, he still said there is no God. And people believe it. People follow him. People still hear him saying it today. They're still playing the movies. There was a good movie out by Ben Stein. Did you see that word, Ben Stein? Where, you know, the guy who did Bueller in the cartoon, movies. They used to do the dry eyes commercial, are your eyes dry, you know. And anyway, he did a commercial about teachers who cannot say what is true. They'll get fired. They can't say there's a God. They can't say that science proves evolution is false. They can't say that. And at the end of the movie, he had talked to these scientists over and over and over throughout the movie. At the end of the movie, they said, you know, the reality is there has to be something that started this universe to begin with. They know. They know this. They're just getting wealthy off you who buy into what they're doing. And what about the educational universities? You know the whole purpose of the university is make you where that you go to work every single day. That you're not able to be an entrepreneur, do your own thing, build your own thing, but rather that you go to work for somebody else. That's why you get a degree, because you can't think for yourself, and they constantly teach evolution in every single thing. Hey, you don't believe me? Go down here to look at what the engineers have put up there all the way down 84. We're looking out there at the Columbia River, and when you stop, read those little plaques and everything. Talk about millions and billions of years and how things happened a long time ago. So you see your position, and let me tell you, when you are working as a teacher in a college education, they will fire you if you change your thinking, and they're there to make sure that the people in the university learn exactly what they say. They use their position to force feed you to be a postmodernist, to be a person who doesn't care about God. And here's the thing, they go strong by destroying other people. You know, have you not heard about these dictators? Here's a question for you. How come a country that has hundreds and hundreds and maybe millions of people, and one person can tell them what to do and kill them? How come they don't overthrow? You know, our founding fathers understood that. That's why they gave us the Second Amendment. The biggest militia in the United States are the free people who have guns and ammunition. I mean, ammunition. A lot of it. What about the people who are taking children and adults off into sex trafficking? They could care less about those people. What about the people who are having to be forced into coming to the United States? You know, a lot of those people don't even want to. But they bring them in by the truckload because it means money, money, money to them. They're strong. They've got some strong point, and they're going to destroy you. They don't care about you. You're nothing but a way to make money. If they could do it with mules or dogs, they would. But they have to use people, and so they'll use them, and they'll make money off of it. I told you about this guy that I was reading about, and he was married to a good-looking woman. He's Russian. He was married to a good-looking Russian woman. And his best friend sold her to Turkey for $1,000 because he needed money. And it took him 3 years, and he finally found a woman and brought her home. Can you imagine? Think about that. His best friend. How do you think that way? So you trust in the money you're going to get. You trust in man. You trust in, you say God is not worthwhile. There is no God there. It doesn't matter. righteous will see, and it should have been fear, not fear, see and fear. The righteous know what's going on. We see this, we understand this, we know it to be. And in this dark world, we are the light. You want to know how to make the world not so dark? You add light. All the darkness in the world cannot extinguish the light of a single candle. God designed it that way. Satan cannot extinguish you if you love God. All you need is a single person to stand up and say, I love God, I'm going to do what's right, and then the world changes because of it. Do we live in a postmodern world? Yes. Do we have to live according to the postmodern way? No. What can we do about it? We can live according to how God has designed us to live. And hopefully we will impress other people and they will want to do it too. Simple as that. And guess what? We're going to die one day. We might as well die for Christ. Better than living for ourselves, wouldn't it? If you're not right with God, now's the time as we stand and we sing this song together.